Time to talk about accessibility, what it is, why it's important, and how to make sure your Webflow websites are accessible. So let's start with what is accessibility in the web. So basically, accessibility means that you're designing your website so that everybody, even if people have some kind of a disability, will be able to navigate and understand and interact with your website. And here's an example. Let's say that you have a website, but the text is so small and the buttons are too hard to click and images don't have description. Then some people, for example, maybe old people find it hard to read, or people who are visually impaired and they're using sight readers to basically listen to what's on the website, they don't understand what the website is about. So building accessible websites, meaning that these people as well are going to be able to browse the website and use it. Okay? And so this is important because depending on where your clients are, there are some countries where you are legally bound to make sure that your website is accessible or passes some accessibility bars. Otherwise, you might be sued. So again, you have to check based on the location, based on the industry of the clients. Maybe there are some legal requirements. It's not the same all over the world and it's different, but in some places there are legal repercussions. Of course, this is just the best user experience, making sure that everybody can use the website. And lastly, when we build accessible website, it makes it also easier for Google to understand what the website is about. And it usually makes so the website is going to rank higher and is going to get better SEO because the website is accessible. Okay, so what does that mean for you when you're building? What do you need to do? Number one, and we've already talked about this multiple times throughout the videos, you need to make sure that you're using headings properly, okay? Some designers just use H1 when they want to have big text on their website. This is not the right way to do it, right? You need to have only one H1 per page, right? It's the main title. And then H2 is the heading of a section. And then H3 is subsection. So you need to use them properly. The next thing that we haven't talked about yet is adding alt text to images. Alt text stands for alternative text and is basically a textual description of the image for people who can't see and they're using sight readers, right? So again, the problem is blind users, they rely on screen readers, but images without text are skipped. And the way we solve this is we're adding meaningful alt text to every non-decorative image. Let me jump into Webflow and show you how this looks like. When I open up the assets panel, and let's say I click on this edit settings for this image. So we have this image and it has a name. In this case, it's hero image, but it doesn't have, you can see here, we've got an alt text and we basically need to write a description here. So this might be a young girl with flowers around her. Okay. And you can decide how you want to describe this. Now, this is a descriptive text because for some images, like for example, this arrow that we have here, we don't really need to define this as an arrow. This is called a decorative image. And sometimes like this diamond, for example, these are decorative images, so they don't really need alt text. They can be skipped. Let me save changes for this. And it's not going to really make the website not accessible. So the only thing you need to do is actually mark this as a decorative image. So one thing you'll have to do is to review all of your assets and make sure that you've added alt text to them. Now on big websites, this can be a little bit time consuming. And this is a good place to mention that Webflow has an app store here. And you can probably search for things like alt text. And there might be a lot of actually apps here, like I don't know personally any of them, so I'm not making recommendations, but a lot of them can use things like AI to review all the images that you have on your website, understand what's in the image, and write this alt text for you. So that's going to make making a big website accessible so much faster. Of course, you might have to pay a little bit, or some of them have free plans and stuff like that. But if you care about this and if you have too many images to do this on your own, that's another way to go through and run through this very fast and make your process efficient. So this is alt text. Next, we want to make sure that people can use keyboard to navigate throughout our website, right? Not everybody's using a mouse or a trackpad to navigate. And the way to do that is by using focus states. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to preview our website and I'm going to hit tab because people who are not with a cursor, right? I'm going to hit tab again. And you can see here that we're jumping between the buttons here. And when we have a button, it is selected like this. So visually, they can see which button they are selecting right now. Now, as you can see, by default, Webflow does mark some of them as selected. But I just want to show you that if I select a link here and I go to style, I also have this focused keyboard and I can style how I want this to look like. Now, it's hard to see, but there is like a black outline around this icon right now so that people can know that when they're navigating using a tab, this button is now selected. So you always want to test out your website, see that the focus state, if the default state looks good, that's good. If you don't have a focus state, I already noticed, I think that for the arrows here, we didn't have a proper focus state. So maybe you want to go ahead and create that just to make sure that all the links are accessible using the keyboard. So this is keyboard navigation. As I mentioned, a lot of users don't use a mouse, and we need to make sure that all the interactive elements can be navigated using the tab key. All right, next is sufficient color contrast, right? When there is a low color contrast, for example, you're using like a very light gray on a white background, then sometimes it's very, very hard to read, especially if you're visually impaired. And you want to make sure that there is a strong contrast between text and background colors. There is actually kind of like a standard in terms of what is considered a good contrast. And Webflow actually has a color panel checker that helps us see this. So let me show you. In this case, let's, for example, choose this, this element. And now in this, we are using variables for colors, but if I would go ahead and unlink this just for a second and open up the colors panel, you can see here below that we have contrast ratio, right? In this case, it's AAA is like the best contrast. It's like very good contrast. You can see it's also green. Basically tells you that this is good. This is the ratio of the contrast, right? But notice if in this case, let's say I would want to use, I'm going to reduce the opacity here because I want to make this like light gray. You can see as I'm moving this down, this moves from AAA to 2A, from AAA to 2A, and then completely goes into fail, meaning this text is currently not contrasted enough. And if you would make a choice like this, this is really not a great contrast. Even if I would make something like this, let's say I choose this aqua, and then let's go ahead and unlink this for a second. You can already see it understands with the pink background below. It's not that this aqua is just not readable. Maybe on black background, it would have a contrast, but on this particular background, it is failing. So you want to make sure that you're checking your text as you're designing and building your website just to make sure that there's enough contrast. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, these decisions are actually made, in Figma before we're even getting to Webflow. So if you're designing in Figma, there are also plugins that help you with color contrast in Figma. But if you're building in Webflow, just make sure that you're checking and that the contrast is sufficient. Lastly, there is accessible typography, and we've touched upon this a little bit in the beginning. The problem is that some users who are visually impaired, they just make the default font in their browser a little bit bigger. And if we want our website to be accessible, we want to respect the font size that they are choosing. And the way to do that is make sure that we are using REM instead of pixels for our font sizes. So in this project that we've built in this first module, we didn't do that. We just used pixels because I just wanted to make things simple for us. But as we'll move into the more advanced modules, we will want to respect the user's choice for font size. And so we will be using REM for type elements. And let me do a quick reminder. I talked about this in the video about measurements, but REM basically means that the user settings, let's say a user setting, the default font size is 20 for them. Then when we will make a choice, we will set the basic font size in the website for 1 REM. That would be 20 because it's 20 times 1. But if we will make a headline 2 REM, it's going to be 20 times 2, meaning 40. And everything is going to be calculated based on this root font size. And we can also use that for things like the padding and spacing and things like that. So we'll get more into that in the next module. Lastly, I want to show you that Webflow has an audit panel, which now as we're nearing the end of this project build and we'll wrap things up, it's always a good idea to go to this audit panel, which is right here at the bottom. Open it up and see what Webflow tells us. In this case, it basically just tells us that we have 3 images that are missing alt text, and we can just go here, open them up, find them in the, find this arrow, basically shows me where the arrow is. But I'll basically go here and mark them either as decorative or add a description until I make sure that I don't have any problems. And I'll do that on every page to make sure my website is accessible.